Hi guys, as you could probably tell, today we're going to be running down the 2.13 update content patch, and with this I'll also be talking about the bug that happened if you didn't see it regarding the PC client, as well as the exclusion of a character from the balance patch, in addition to the new EE, which is pretty crazy. Without further ado though, let's get into it. The first thing we have to talk about is Fallen Cecilia, and actually her removal from the balance adjustment entirely. Now, I did see a couple people, or, based on this, they had basically mentioned that regarding the feedback that was given from Fallen Cecilia, and if you scroll all the way down and you look at the comment, specifically from Stove, the Fallen Cecilia change was negatively received, which I understand. However, this feels a little bit weird, to be honest. Even without this change going in, or even without them deciding to put in this change, I feel like a lot of the changes that it described, or that they described here, felt pretty interesting, at least. It wasn't just a strict everyone gets in, or Fallen Cecilia gets like a bit of a damage increase or a bit of like a buff here or there. I mean, they changed the functionality of her S3. They gave her a speed imprint, which I thought kind of shifted her into a more protective knight kind of playstyle. And ultimately, I do think that the stat bonuses in regards to how she functions was actually pretty significant here, with her gaining the additional max HP. But ultimately, I guess we do have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that speed, or giving knights in general speed, has never felt like a super great fix or a band-aid to some of the issues or some of the concerns that people have had, especially for some of the older characters in the game, including Fallen Cecilia. So in that sense, I guess if they wanted to make Fallen Cecilia as broken, as one commenter or one chatter said, as someone like Blood Moon Haste or Mort, I can understand maybe what she needed to do is that everyone is 20% slower than her or something. It had to be that game changing. But what's more, and what I think is actually more relevant about this, is that kind of the symptom, or kind of the larger issue here, even despite, or even regardless of how powerful her buff or her buff would be compared to other characters, is actually that right now, if you want to play speed, you have to deal with Harsetti. And regardless of how many different characters have been released thus far, it still feels like Harsetti is a bit of a problem, because as you guys have probably seen, even when people take something like Young Senya to deal with the Harsetti, or they build their entire account around, or have two different setups for Harsetti, it's just very frustrating to have to deal with it, especially if you're fighting her in content like Guild War, where the second that someone picks Harsetti, or the second that there's a Harsetti, you have to make sure that you're not fighting against a Young Senya, or if you're gonna use your Young Senya, you have to prevent or make sure that you're not fighting against like a resource reduction character like Emma Politis, which I think is what has kind of stunted the Harsetti is dead kind of thinking that you'd otherwise expect from a direct counter like Young Senya being introduced to the game, specifically for Harsetti. Now, to add to this, they've also included the fact that if you decided to pull for anything relating to Cecilia in any capacity, including things like the drop rate up, or even if you decided to buy her from like the Galaxy Coin shop, they're willing to give you a full refund. Again, I'm not exactly sure if this is just in terms of, or I would assume this is just if you used in-game currency to do so. Again, you'll probably have to contact them or message support to see exactly what they mean. However, in this, or specifically for this, their response to this was that we sincerely apologize for any inconvenience caused by this last minute change, and that moving forward, they'll try their best to announce balance adjustments that highlight the unique strengths and charms of each hero. Now, again, I don't think that the Cecilia character change was honestly that bad, all things considered. Now, again, I do think that there are, placebo buffs, or there are character changes in the past that they've released that don't really do anything. And personally, I am almost kind of shocked that they went through with this change for Fallen Cecilia, because in terms of not only just usability, but in terms of how different it felt like Fallen Cecilia would have performed with the, her new imprint and her basically having the strip on her S3 that can't be countered, by the way, but would also still count as, triggering the cooldowns of stuff like Savior Aiden or even like Albedo. We still have Remnant Violet, who, again, though I understand, this massacre changes good in terms of being paired with Para, this doesn't really solve much of Remnant Violet's own issues, though he does obviously, or he has received a buff in the past. And just in general, I feel like it's, it wasn't as though Fallen Cecilia's buff was so bad. Like, what they did was just give her like -1 turn cooldown, and that was their huge significant change. But again, I can understand why people may be kind of upset, especially since Fallen Cecilia is a very old character, and the way that they changed her was kind of, speed focused or speed oriented, which, again, Harsetti's in the game, so I can at least understand where they're coming from in terms of the frustration towards this. Now, in addition to this, I won't go to, or I should say, moving along from this, I won't go over too much of the balance patch things. I've already talked about it in a previous video. And instead, I want to talk briefly about Tori and my thoughts. Now, I've seen a couple of you guys mention it. Yeah, I think Tori's one of these characters that we'll really have to see the multipliers of. This whole, buff immunity thing that she has is cool in concept, but as you guys mentioned, and I didn't even realize this as I was describing this, you can actually reduce the duration of these buffs. So if you have any character that decides to, or has some form of reducing the turn duration of some of her skills, this effectively ruins her. Well, I say ruin, but effectively it neutralizes her mechanic on S2, though she does still have some other mechanics to deal with that I think make her kind of cool. Now, beyond this, I think that, again, the fact that you can have immunity to start off and make the immunity unstrippable, though still technically turn reducible, is still pretty valuable. However, again, I think regardless of the way that this looked, this is, or Tori specifically, is going to be a character that we'll have to see the damage stats of, or the damage performance of, before we really assess to see how strong she is. Regardless, though, she's pretty cool. I think the barrier and the attack increase that she has is pretty cool with her artifact. But now let's briefly talk about the banners, or, well, a bit of the gacha. Rwanda, and pretty much any banner at this point, just to keep it short and simple, are just not really worth it anymore. If you want to pull for a specific banner, you could always just do the story, the story summon in order to get it. However, I will say that Rwanda as a character in general, in historic, or in a more historic sense, or historically, has been very good in terms of dealing with PvE, but nowadays there's so many grass or there's so many healers and PvE units in general that I don't actually feel like this is something that you really need to pull for, especially with a limited character like Tori on the horizon. That being said, though, who knows what even, the word limited means anymore. Anyways, there's also a special side story alongside her, and this looks cool, honestly. Pretty cool. She's got this whole, double persona thing going on. However, what I think is actually pretty interesting is rather this new EE that, again, was technically leaked and bugged through the system or through the PC client, but let's just go over this briefly. Now, if you didn't hear, this is a new EE that has been showcased, or that has been introduced specifically for Choux, and effectively what this does now is that not only do you gain speed, which, again, there's a couple people that play Choux particularly fast that makes this really, really sketchy and quite concerning, especially for the opener Choux for whatever reason. But in addition to this, this EE now at the end of her turn causes her to enter into stealth for 1 turn. Now, I think this is a very, very this is going to be a very frustrating EE, or a newly very frustrating character to deal with, as formerly I think a lot of people, especially in the past, would have to at least force their Choux to be built with ER or with extreme bulk, or be paired alongside cleansers so that your Choux could maintain her buffs. But this new stealth is going to be quite annoying, because now this means that if you are someone that, for whatever reason, is able to stack ER, or if you're able to just avoid fighting against, any non-attack skill strippers that can target multiple enemies or multiple targets at the same time. This is basically going to be like one of the characters that you have to specifically build around or play around to prevent your team from literally getting, I don't know, like 50% or more of their health chunked away just off of injuries and then later damage. Now, in addition to this, you have to remember that Choux also gives the team speed buff, which is very, very powerful, especially nowadays, and especially if you ban Harsetti. But more than anything else, I think this, in terms of the stat or the added stat that she gains, is very powerful. And I think the stealth, though not even given at the start of the first turn, will still be kind of annoying, assuming you're fighting against a slower player. Now, again, whether or not you're going to encounter players that play really slow is kind of, up for debate. However, I can definitely imagine someone that's playing Choux in that maybe 260 to 270 range, or even slower, that 240 to 250 range, who has a lot of HP, has a lot of defense, or even just full stacks HP and just ER, and then just goes into stealth, has like Bastion of Hope, for instance, and just continuously slams their S3 over and over and over in order to injure your entire team until you can just one-shot them with the Choux or with another character. Now, again, if you haven't seen, this is or should be the official information regarding the EE. But in case you're curious, and just as a minor aside, yesterday, I believe, as the game was just, I guess, normally or regularly being tested or played and everything was live, there was, for whatever reason, I think players disconnecting or being booted from the server. And with it, when they came back, especially if they were on the PC client, I believe, or to some degree, or while playing on the PC client, the game bugged and they showed off this EE to begin with. But in addition to this, they also showed Tori in like some weird, she had like the Grail of Blood artifact as her icon, or it was already in the game, which is why we're able to see these artifacts or these EEs in general. However, with this now, we can confirm that this is actually an EE. This is an actual change that they're adding to the game. And with this, my honest thoughts, at least my honest first impression thoughts, is that this is cool. However, not going to be, something that I think will necessarily, I should say, this isn't really going to be something that I think will be as game breaking or as OP as people will think it will be. That isn't to say that it won't be strong, but I think that especially, or up until basically they decide to do something about Harsetti, and deal with Harsetti as a character that basically affects or heavily restricts the way that speed or fast players or speed-oriented units are played. Until they address Harsetti, it feels like it's going to be, or it feels a little bit weird even to comment on speed-based units in the game right now, especially since, well, if you want to play speed units, you basically have to assume that Harsetti is banned, or you have to take the Harsetti. But that has so many, moving parts and moving, issues or topics to address. Just because, are you going to go down the route with Harsetti where you build 2 units? Do you pre-ban Harsetti, or are you going to run a fast Harsetti? All these things are really frustrating and kind of difficult to kind of say for sure, which is why I won't comment too heavily about this. However, if Harsetti wasn't in the game, which that was the case, I do think that this EE would be pretty powerful, especially since I think, back in the day, although some people kind of struggled a bit with characters like Zio, having, enough ER on someone like the Urban Shadow Choux might allow you to now deal with tankier teams more reliably. However, again, this isn't like a cleanse, so if you do get unbuffable or if you do get tagged by any debuffs, this might not feel nearly as good as you think it does. Of course, as a minor aside as well, this also means that if you are encountering characters like New Moon Luna, you'd also have to deal with that as well. But maybe you could argue that you could pair them together. Enough rambling and enough thinking. Overall, I think it's pretty cool. Now, again, there are the different, the other adjustments or the additions for the patch, which I'll leave you guys to read through and parse through. Seems pretty cool, though. Decent update. Excited for the Choux EE. I'm definitely going to pick it up. You should, too, if you haven't. But, as always, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Check out the rest of my socials if you want to see any other content. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.